slant. Yes, there is an ideological slant. When you go back to the genesis of participatory research, which goes back to the 70s, that's exactly what they were saying, is that so far, and particularly the social science research, talked about being very apolitical, being very objective. You know, what are the norms? The research had to be very objective, it had to be unbiased, there were the validity norms and so on. And participatory research questioned all of that and said that no, research is extremely ideological, is biased, and it will determine whose perspective, because eventually you're presenting somebody's perspective in terms of the way you design your questionnaire, in terms of the way you collect your data, in terms of the way you analyze and you present your findings. It was in the 70s that the whole question was raised about the ideological bias of social science research as well, and certainly Freire did tell us that, you know, we have to be very clear as to whose side are we on, and that is the ideological slant or the bias that we're talking about. Now, in terms of the global economy and what it is, a globalized world that we live in, that is precisely the danger, because it is the poor who will get left out. It is the poor who will have no access to not only technology, to resources, and so therefore it is extremely important that we take a clear stand, and we are very clear that we are going to work with the poor. Now, in terms of community participation, how do we do it? Two questions have been raised on. I don't think I can tell you in 2 minutes or 1 minute, because I think that itself would require a lecture. There is enough expertise in this country. There are people who know how to do it. They encourage community participation. There are ways and means of doing it. It's just a matter of commitment. Are you really committed? And I think as adult educators, you should be committed, you know. And so if you are, you will not start with a program, because that's something that will come later. You will start with finding out what is it that the people want. The problem is that we don't even listen to what people are saying. So therefore, community participation is possible. There are enough examples in this country from which we can learn as to how it can be done. So therefore, it is possible. Now, in terms of the use of technology, one is not suggesting that we bring in alien technologies. Not at all. You have to start with technologies that are there. And people are using local level technologies. Okay? So let us understand, and I even mentioned traditional technologies. I mean, there are people are using, and those of you who've been involved in the TLCs have been using traditional technology. So I'm not even, going to talk about it. But let's start from there. But that is not to suggest that we should not get into other technologies as well. And mention was made of radio, community radio. Yes, why not? As I said, the bottom line is participation. And that is something that we need to really pay attention to. It's basically to draw the attention of the policymakers and planners that you must provide resources which are commensurate with the magnitude of the problem. And to that extent, I think this needs to be highlighted. Because if we in adult education do not talk about the magnitude of the problem or the need for resources, who will? I mean, nobody else is going to fight for our cause. So it is, as I said again, it's not to give this impression it is we versus them or school education versus, because it is a larger issue of education, but certainly we are talking as adult educators of the need for resources to be provided, and if it is ICT, well, we're talking about technology to be provided. There is a lot of training that has to happen, and the training again has to be very, very gradual. We talked about community participation. Well, we start, as I mentioned to you, even in terms of the location. Where do you locate? Where do you start if it's a community learning center? Where do you keep those the equipment? And so it is not us who should decide. It is not the functionaries who should decide, and they do it on the basis of convenience. But it is the community members, particularly the poor, particularly the women amongst them. If they take the decision, there is a greater possibility that they will come, they will use, but it's a slow process. Let me underline this fact that it is an extremely slow process. You cannot rush, you cannot hurry. But once they begin to understand the potential, once they begin to understand that that they can really use it, and that I think is what is necessary and important.
Thank you very much for Dr. Digge and all the participants also. So thank you very much for your cooperation.